A driver on an icy highway at night spotted a 1-year-old baby crawling on the asphalt, miraculously stopping just a meter away. The little girl was as cold as ice. Stay with me to find out what happens next. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from today, and what you think of the story. Martin gripped the steering wheel tighter as a wall of fog swallowed his headlights. The deserted highway stretched before him like a ribbon disappearing into nothingness, the only sound the gentle hum of tires against asphalt and the occasional static from his dying radio signal. What was supposed to be a routine drive home had transformed into something unsettling, as if the world outside his car windows had ceased to exist. Is there ever a moment when our everyday choices determine someone else's fate? The cold autumn air seeped through the car's heating system, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. Martin reached to turn up the heat, the glow of the dashboard the only warm light in this void of darkness. He blinked hard, fighting the hypnotic effect of the endless road. His mind wandered to the dinner he'd just left, awkward conversations with old friends whose lives had taken different paths than his own. He was still processing the hollow feeling of disconnection when something caught his eye, a movement, small, almost imperceptible on the edge of the road ahead. Hook, could this tiny figure change Martin's life forever? Most people would dismiss it as their imagination playing tricks, especially on a night when visibility was measured in mere feet. Most people would keep driving, eager to escape the oppressive fog and reach the comfort of home. Martin wasn't most people. He slowed the car, squinting through the windshield. The shape moved again, low to the ground, small, and terrifyingly out of place on this isolated stretch of highway. His heart jumped to his throat as recognition dawned, a child, a toddler in thin pajamas crawling on the freezing asphalt with no adult in sight. "Oh my God," Martin gasped, slamming on the brakes and pulling to the shoulder. He leapt from the car, the cold air shocking his system as he ran toward the tiny figure. The little girl couldn't have been more than 2 years old, her skin frighteningly cold to the touch, her eyes vacant as if she'd retreated deep inside herself for protection. No tears, no cries for help, just silence that chilled Martin more than the autumn air. With trembling hands, he wrapped his jacket around her and carried her back to the car, cranking the heater to full blast as he pulled out his phone to call emergency services. Memories flooded back, himself as a child lost and terrified in a crowded marketplace, the relief when a stranger guided him back to his mother's arms. Now he was that stranger for someone else. "It's okay," he whispered to the silent child as he dialed. "I've got you, you're safe now." But safety was relative, and the night was far from over. As Martin waited for the dispatcher to answer, he noticed another figure emerging from the fog, an elderly woman with wild eyes and disheveled clothes, staring directly at his car with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "That's my granddaughter," she called out, her voice eerily calm despite her frantic appearance. "Give her back to me now." Something in the woman's hollow gaze made Martin's protective instincts flare. The child, who had been still as stone since he found her, suddenly gripped his sleeve with surprising strength. "911, what's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice finally came through the phone, just as the old woman placed her palm against his car window, her expression transforming from calm to something far more disturbing. "I need help," Martin said, unable to take his eyes off the woman now frantically trying to open his locked car door. "And I think we might need it fast." As blue and red lights finally pierced the fog in the distance, Martin couldn't shake the feeling that stopping on this road tonight had plunged him into something much darker than the weather, a family tragedy whose depths he was only beginning to fathom. Martin Taylor had always been the person who noticed things others missed. Growing up as the middle child in a chaotic household of 5 kids, he developed a keen awareness of his surroundings, a survival mechanism that had served him well in his 34 years. His job as a high school counselor only sharpened this skill, teaching him to recognize the subtle signs of a teenager in crisis. Tonight, that same instinct had led him to brake on a foggy road when most would have continued driving. Now, sitting in the harsh fluorescent light of the police station, he was questioned by a detective whose weary eyes suggested he'd seen far too many tragedies in this small town. "So you were coming back from Riverside?" Detective Spencer asked, tapping his pen against a worn notebook. "A dinner with old friends," Martin confirmed, his thoughts still with the silent little girl the paramedics had whisked her away in an ambulance 20 minutes ago, her tiny hand reaching toward him as the doors closed. "Is she going to be okay?" "The doctors will do everything they can," Spencer said, his non-answer revealing more than intended. Now tell me again about the woman who approached your car. The woman in question sat in another room, visible through a window in the door. Her gray hair hung in wild tangles around a face lined with age but animated by something unstable. Officer Landy stood beside her, writing notes as the woman gestured emphatically. She claimed to be the child's grandmother, but something felt wrong, Martin explained. The little girl was practically hypothermic, crawling alone on a highway in pajamas. What grandmother would allow that? Detective Spencer nodded slowly. And that's when you showed her the dashcam footage? The dashcam had been Martin's salvation, installed after a minor accident last year. It had captured everything: the empty road, the crawling child, and the fact that the elderly woman appeared only after Martin had rescued the toddler. Her whole demeanor changed when she saw the video, Martin said. She started talking about voices and lights, and it didn't make any sense. The station door burst open, letting in a gust of cold air and two people whose expressions carried the unique terror of parents missing a child. Our daughter is missing, the woman, maybe 30, with dark circles under reddened eyes, rushed to the front desk. Melissa, she's 2 years old. We just discovered her crib empty. Her husband stood behind her, a solid presence despite the tremor in his hands. We've searched everywhere. She couldn't have opened the doors herself. The night shift officers exchanged glances of dawning recognition. Detective Spencer stood immediately, gesturing to the couple. Mr. and Mrs. Farah, I think we may have found your daughter. The relief that flooded their faces crumbled when they learned the circumstances. Vera Farah collapsed into a chair as her husband Nathan viewed the dashcam footage, his face hardening with each frame. Who would take her out in this weather, he demanded, his accent thickening with emotion. And leave her alone on a highway? Officer Landy appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. Sir, I think we may have an answer to that. The woman we're holding is Clarice Farah. She says she's Nathan's mother. The color drained from Nathan's face. My mother is in a care facility. She has severe dementia with psychotic features. She shouldn't be able to leave without supervision. This revelation sent the station into action. Calls were made to the care facility, which was now in chaos discovering Clarice's absence. Meanwhile, Martin learned more about the Farah family as he sat with Vera waiting for news about little Melissa. They had immigrated from Ukraine 5 years ago, bringing Nathan's mother with them despite her deteriorating mental condition. The illness had progressed rapidly, forcing them to place her in specialized care last year when her delusions became potentially dangerous. She loves Melissa, Vera whispered, tears streaming down her face. But sometimes she doesn't recognize her own family. She talks about missions and guidance from voices only she can hear. The hospital called. Melissa was stable, severely chilled but responding well to treatment. The relief in the room was palpable, but Martin couldn't shake a sense of unease. Can I see her? Vera asked, already standing. Please, I need to see my baby. As arrangements were made to transport the Farahs to the hospital, Detective Spencer pulled Martin aside. We still need your official statement, but that can wait until tomorrow. You did a good thing tonight, Mr. Taylor. Martin nodded, gathering his jacket. The adrenaline that had carried him through the night was fading, leaving him drained. As he headed for the door, Nathan Farah intercepted him, gripping his hand with surprising strength. You saved our daughter's life, he said simply. We can never repay that debt. The intensity in the man's eyes made Martin uncomfortable. He hadn't done anything extraordinary, just what any decent person would do. I'm just glad I was there, he replied. But as Martin drove home through the now thinning fog, that statement echoed in his mind. What if he hadn't been there? What if he had been checking his phone instead of watching the road? The randomness of it all, the precise timing that put him on that exact stretch of highway at the exact moment needed, seemed both miraculous and terrifying. He arrived home to an empty apartment that suddenly felt too quiet. Sleep would not come easily tonight. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the little girl crawling alone in the darkness and the hollow eyes of a grandmother who, in her confusion, had nearly caused an unthinkable tragedy. His phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Spencer. Clarice Farah claims she was taking the child to the light. Says you interrupted a sacred journey.
Being evaluated by psych services now.
Martin stared at the message for a long time, a chill running through him that had nothing to do with the autumn night. Whatever had happened on that foggy road, he was now irrevocably connected to the Farah family and their troubled matriarch. And something told him that the ripples from tonight would continue long after the fog had cleared.
3 days after finding Melissa on the highway, Martin returned to his normal routine, or tried to. The incident had left him shaken in ways he couldn't articulate.
During counseling sessions with students, he found his mind drifting back to the image of the tiny girl crawling across the asphalt, to the grandmother's hollow eyes, to the precise alignment of circumstances that had placed him on that road at that exact moment. The local newspaper had run a small article about the incident, keeping names confidential but describing how a vigilant driver had saved a toddler from certain tragedy. Martin had declined to be interviewed, uncomfortable with being labeled a hero for what seemed like basic human decency. His phone rang during his lunch break, an unknown number.
"Mr. Taylor, this is Vera Farah. The hospital gave me your number." Her voice was tentative. "Melissa is coming home today. We wondered if you might visit sometime. We'd like to thank you properly." Martin hesitated. He'd done his part, stopped, helped, provided his statement to the police. Wouldn't further involvement be crossing some boundary?
Yet the invitation tugged at something within him. "Of course," he heard himself say.
"I'd like to see how she's doing."
That evening, he found himself pulling up to a modest duplex in the eastern part of town. The Farah home was simple but immaculate, family photos lining the walls, the scent of cooking filling the air, toys neatly organized in a corner of the living room. There was love in every detail. Melissa sat on a colorful playmat, arranging wooden blocks with focused determination. She looked like any other healthy toddler, pink-cheeked, bright-eyed, babbling softly to herself. Only the slight weariness in her movements hinted at her recent trauma. When she looked up and saw Martin, her reaction was immediate and unexpected. Her small face lit up with recognition. She abandoned her blocks and crawled toward him, pulling herself up on his pant leg with a determined grip. "She remembers you," Nathan said, watching with a mixture of gratitude and something harder to define, perhaps a father's complex emotions about another man being his daughter as protector.
"The doctors said she might not remember anything from that night." Vera appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Please sit. We have dinner ready."
The meal that followed was awkward at first, the conversation stilted as they navigated around the circumstances of their connection. But gradually, as Martin shared stories from his work as a school counselor and the Farahs told him about their journey from Ukraine to America, the atmosphere warmed. "We came for opportunities, yes, but also for better care for Nathan's mother," Vera explained, passing a plate of stuffed cabbage rolls. "In our village, there were no good facilities for someone with her condition."
"Has there been any update on her status?" Martin asked carefully. Nathan's face darkened.
"She's been transferred to the psychiatric unit at County General. The doctors say this episode represents a significant deterioration.
They're talking about a more secure facility.
Somewhere she can't hurt herself or others," Vera added, her voice dropping.
The implications hung heavy in the air. Melissa, seemingly oblivious to the adults' tension, continued eating her dinner, occasionally offering Martin a shy smile.
After dinner, while Vera put Melissa to bed, Nathan showed Martin photographs, their life in Ukraine, their wedding, Clarice in healthier days, a proud grandmother holding newborn Melissa. "It's hard to reconcile this woman," Martin said, pointing to a picture of a smiling Clarice holding flowers in a garden, "with the person I met on the road." "That's the cruelty of her illness," Nathan replied. "It stole my mother piece by piece.
Some days she recognizes us, remembers everything.
Other days she's a stranger with dangerous ideas." He pulled out another photo album, this one newer. "Here is the care facility where she lived.
A good place, safe, we thought."
His voice caught. "We still don't understand how she got out, how she took Melissa without anyone noticing." "The police are investigating that," Martin assured him.
"Yes, but meanwhile, we are afraid," Nathan's admission came in a whisper. "What if it happens again?"
"Vera doesn't sleep.
She checks Melissa's room every hour."
Before Martin could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Detective Spencer. Need to speak with you about the Farah case.
New developments. Call me. A sense of unease crept over Martin.
He excused himself to make the call from the front porch, the night air sharp in his lungs. We reviewed the security footage from Evergreen Care Center, Spencer said without preamble.
Clarice Farah didn't escape alone. Someone helped her. Martin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn evening.
Helped her? Who would? That's what we're trying to determine, Spencer cut in.
But there's more.
We found notes in Clarice's room, rambling mostly, incoherent, but with clear references to taking the child to a meeting place on that specific highway.
You're saying this wasn't random? Martin's mind raced. That she planned to leave Melissa there? We don't know what she planned, Spencer said carefully.
But this wasn't a spontaneous break.
And whoever helped her access the Farah's home to take Melissa is still out there.
The porch light cast Martin's shadow long across the lawn. Through the window, he could see Nathan and Vera in their living room, their faces animated in conversation, unaware of this new threat.
Should they know about this? Martin asked, weak.
Placing an officer near their home tonight, Spencer replied.
I'll brief them fully tomorrow when we have more information. For now, don't alarm them unnecessarily.
After ending the call, Martin returned inside with the weight of this new knowledge. The evening concluded with warm handshakes and an invitation to visit again. As Martin prepared to leave, Melissa, who should have been asleep, appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas so similar to those she'd worn on the highway. She waved a tiny hand at him, a gesture of trust that tightened something in his chest.
Driving home, Martin couldn't shake the detective's words. Someone had helped Clarice.
Someone had facilitated what could have been a child's death. The randomness that had troubled him before, the chance alignment that put him on that road at the right moment, now seemed less like coincidence and more like the intersection of calculated malice and blind luck.
His apartment felt even emptier that night.
He checked his locks twice before going to bed, though he knew the threat wasn't directed at him, or was it? A new, disturbing thought emerged as he drifted toward uneasy sleep.
What if his involvement that night had interrupted something more complex than an old woman's delusion? What if finding Melissa had made him part of whatever was still unfolding?
The dream came without warning. Melissa crawling on an endless highway, the fog thickening around her, and a figure watching from the trees, not Clarice this time, but someone else, someone whose face remained in shadow but whose intent felt palpably malevolent. Martin jolted awake to the sound of his phone ringing. The clock read 2:17 a.m. Detective Spencer's voice came through, tense and urgent.
There's been an incident at the hospital. Clarice Farah is missing again. What do you mean, she's missing?
Martin's voice cracked as he sat upright in bed, fully awake now.
How does someone just disappear from a secure hospital ward?
That's what we're trying to figure out, Detective Spencer said, the sound of activity in the background suggesting he was already at the scene.
Security cameras went dark for exactly 4 minutes.
When they came back online, Clarice was gone.
No alarms triggered, no doors forced. Martin was already pulling on clothes, phone wedged between ear and shoulder. The Farah's officers are at their house now. They've been moved to a hotel as a precaution.
I'm coming to the station, Martin said, not fully understanding why he felt so compelled to involve himself further.
This wasn't his family, wasn't his responsibility, yet the image of Melissa reaching for his pant leg, trusting him, wouldn't leave his mind.
The police station was a flurry of activity despite the early hour. Maps were spread across tables, officers studied computer screens showing hospital layouts, and at the center of it all, Nathan Farah looked like a man barely holding himself together. When he saw Martin, relief washed over his face. You came, he said simply, as if Martin's presence was expected, needed. Vera sat nearby, Melissa asleep in her arms, tiny hands clutched around her mother's sweater, even in sleep.
Any leads? Martin asked Spencer, who was reviewing security footage.
Nothing concrete, the detective replied. But we found this in Clarice's room. He slid a paper across the desk, a drawing of what looked like a cabin near water, crude but recognizable. In the corner, written in Cyrillic letters, was a phrase.
What does it say? Martin asked.
Nathan leaned in, his brow furrowing. It says where light meets water in Ukrainian, he translated.
But I don't understand.
His voice trailed off, then his eyes widened.
Wait, could it be the old fishing cabin? My father had a small place on Lake Morrison when we first moved here.
Clarice loved it there. Said the way the sunrise reflected on the water was like seeing heaven on earth.
Is it still in your family? Spencer asked, already signaling to an officer.
No, we sold it years ago when my father died. It was too much upkeep, and with her condition worsening, Nathan ran a hand through his hair. But she wouldn't go there. It's abandoned now, probably falling apart. It's worth checking, Spencer said. If she associates it with positive memories, with light, the implications hung in the air.
Clarice's delusions centered around the light. What if this cabin represented that concept in her damaged mind?
As officers prepared to investigate the cabin, Martin found himself volunteering to stay with the Farahs. There was something unsettling about the situation, not just Clarice's escape but the methodical nature of it all, the disabled cameras, the lack of forced entry, the drawing in her room like breadcrumbs meant to be followed. This doesn't feel random, Martin confided to Spencer before the detective left.
Someone is orchestrating this.
I know, Spencer replied grimly.
That's what worries me. Hours passed in tense waiting.
The Farahs were set up in a small conference room, Melissa now awake and playing quietly with toys brought from home. Martin made coffee runs and tried to maintain conversation, anything to distract from the uncertainty. During a moment when Nathan stepped out to speak with an officer, Vera moved closer to Martin, her voice barely above a whisper. There's something I haven't told the police, she said, glancing at the door.
Something about Clarice.
Martin leaned in, sensing the weight of her confession. Before her condition became severe, Clarice was involved with a group back in Ukraine, not quite a cult, but spiritual seekers who believed they could communicate with forces beyond our world.
Vera's hands trembled as she spoke.
Nathan's father pulled her away from them when we moved here, but lately, in her confused states, she's been mentioning names from that time.
Have you told Nathan this? Martin asked.
Vera shook her head.
He doesn't like to speak of those days.
His father sheltered him from the worst of it. But I found letters in Clarice's things at the care facility, recent ones from someone who signed only with the initial V as someone who encouraged her delusions rather than treating them as illness. The revelation sent a chill through Martin.
You think this person helped her escape twice?
I think, Vera hesitated, gathering courage, I think someone is using her illness for their own purposes. Before Martin could press further, Nathan returned, accompanied by Detective Spencer, whose expression was grim. We found signs of recent occupation at the cabin, Spencer reported. Food wrappers, bedding, but no Clarice. However, we did find this. He held up an evidence bag containing a small worn book. It appears to be some kind of journal, but it's in Ukrainian.
Mr. Farah, we need your help translating. Nathan took the book, handling it with reluctant recognition.
This was my mother's. She kept it hidden when I was growing up, but I found it once. It's full of strange ideas, rituals, beliefs about children being vessels for light.
The room fell silent as the implications settled.
Martin noticed Vera's hand move protectively to Melissa's head, smoothing her hair with trembling fingers. There's more, Spencer continued. We found bus ticket stubs indicating someone traveled from the city to Lake Morrison yesterday afternoon, but the return ticket hasn't been used. So she could still be in that area.
Possibly, Martin asked.
We're expanding the search radius and bringing in K9 units. As night fell again, the tension in the police station mounted. Officers came and went, reports were filed, and maps were marked with search grids. Through it all, the Farahs maintained a quiet dignity, masking obvious terror. Martin found himself growing increasingly restless. Something about the situation nagged at him, a detail overlooked, a connection not yet made. He stepped outside for fresh air, the night surprisingly clear compared to the fog of that fateful evening. His phone buzzed in his pocket, an unfamiliar number.
Against his better judgment, he answered.
You found her on the road, a voice said without introduction, accent thick but words clear. The child was meant for the light.
You interfered. Martin's pulse quickened. Who is this?
Clarice understands what must happen.
The vessel must be prepared. The time approaches. Where is Clarice?
Martin demanded, already gesturing frantically through the window to get an officer's attention.
Who are you?
You cannot stop what has been set in motion, the voice continued, eerily calm. The light calls for its vessel. The child will answer. The call ended abruptly. Martin rushed inside, relaying the conversation to Spencer, who immediately began procedures to trace the call. Nathan and Vera listened, faces pale with renewed fear.
It's happening again, Nathan whispered.
The same obsession my father tried to protect us from.
As technical analysts worked to trace the call, Martin studied the cabin drawing more carefully.
Something about the rendering of the lake caught his attention, not just the water, but specific markings along the shore.
These aren't random lines, he realized aloud. They're trails. Look, this could be the main hiking path around Lake Morrison. And these smaller lines, he looked up at Nathan. Are there caves near the lake? Nathan's expression changed from confusion to dawning comprehension.
Yes, in the limestone ridges above the north shore.
My father used to warn me away from them, unstable, he said. Spencer leaned in, studying the drawing with fresh eyes. Those could be cave entrances.
If she's hiding, the decision was made quickly, redirect search teams to the cave system. As officers mobilized, Martin found himself torn between staying with the Ferris and joining the search. Something pulled him toward those caves, a sense that his role in this strange drama wasn't finished.
I want to go, he told Spencer. I found Melissa once. Maybe I'm meant to help find Clarice too.
The detective hesitated, then nodded.
Stay with the perimeter team. No heroics.
As Martin prepared to leave with the officers, Vera approached, pressing something into his hand, a small wooden toy, a bird painted in bright colors. It was Clarice's favorite before the illness took hold, she explained. If you find her, maybe it will reach whatever part of her is still my mother-in-law.
The drive to Lake Morrison was tense with anticipation.
Martin sat in a police SUV, turning the wooden bird over in his hands, wondering what connection he had to this family that made their plight feel so personal to him. The lake appeared through the trees, moonlight dancing on its surface, beautiful and serene, betraying nothing of the human drama unfolding on its shores. As they approached the base of the limestone ridge, Martin felt a strange certainty growing within him.
Clarice was here, but she wasn't alone.
And whoever was with her had plans for Melissa that went far beyond a grandmother's confused delusions. The radio crackled with the first report from advance teams, signs of recent activity near the eastern cave entrance.
Footprints, 2 distinct sizes, 2 people.
The confirmation of Martin's fears sent a surge of urgency through him. As officers organized into search teams, he stared up at the dark openings in the ridge face, wondering which one held the answers they sought. Then, carried on the night breeze, came a sound that stopped every officer in their tracks, a woman's voice singing a haunting melody that echoed across the water. The words were Ukrainian, but the emotion needed no translation. It was a lullaby, a grandmother singing to a child who wasn't there. The lullaby echoed across the lake, haunting and beautiful. Officers donned tactical gear, flashlights cutting through darkness as they approached the cave system. Martin stood with the perimeter team as instructed, the wooden bird clutched in his hand, feeling simultaneously vital to and removed from the unfolding events. Thermal imaging shows 2 heat signatures approximately 50 meters into the eastern cave, a technician reported, pointing to glowing shapes on a tablet screen, one seated, one standing nearby.
Detective Spencer organized the entry team, their voices low and movements deliberate.
Remember, Clarice Farah is considered a vulnerable person despite the circumstances. The priority is safe extraction of both individuals.
As officers disappeared into the cave entrance, Martin found himself edging closer, drawn by an inexplicable pull.
The singing had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to press against his ears.
His phone vibrated, a text from Vera, any news?
Before he could respond, commotion erupted from the cave mouth.
Officers emerged, escorting Clarice Farah, who appeared disoriented but unharmed. She wore the same disheveled clothes from the night on the highway, her gray hair wild around her face. Her eyes, when they caught the flashlight beams, reflected a disturbing mix of confusion and purpose. But it was the second figure that caused Martin's breath to catch, a man in his 60s, tall and gaunt, with the intense eyes of a zealot. He walked with the stiff dignity of someone who believed himself above the proceedings, ignoring the officers flanking him. Jason Murphy, an officer, informed Spencer, checking identification found on the man. Ukrainian national, visa expired 3 months ago. The name hit Martin like a physical blow, the initial V from the letters Vera had mentioned. As the man was led to a separate vehicle, his gaze locked with Martin's, a smile spreading across his face that contained neither warmth nor humor. "You are the one who found the vessel," he said in heavily accented English. "You have delayed but not prevented what must come." Officers pulled him away before Martin could respond, but the encounter left him shaken. Clarice, meanwhile, sat in the back of an ambulance, a blanket around her shoulders, speaking rapidly in Ukrainian to a translator. Martin approached cautiously, the wooden bird still in his hand. When Clarice saw him, her demeanor changed instantly. Recognition flared in her eyes, followed by something that might have been shame. "You," she said, switching to English. "The road, the fog. You took her from me." "I found Melissa crawling alone," Martin replied gently. "I was trying to help." Clarice's face crumpled. "Jason said it was necessary, that she must find her own way to the light. I wasn't supposed to leave her, but the fog, I got confused." Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. "Is she safe, my granddaughter?" "She's safe," Martin assured her, holding out the wooden bird. "Vera wanted you to have this." Clarice took the toy with trembling hands, cradling it like something precious. "I remember this," she whispered. "From before the voices, before Jason found me again." A paramedic indicated they needed to examine Clarice, so Martin stepped away, approaching Spencer, who was conferring with other officers. "What's the story?" Martin asked. Spencer rubbed his tired eyes. "From what we can piece together, this Murphy was part of a fringe spiritual group back in Ukraine. He reconnected with Clarice through the care facility's digital community board, posed as a relative wanting to send encouraging messages to residents, and no one verified his identity. Understaffed facility, overworked administrators." Spencer shrugged. "He cultivated her over months, reinforcing her delusions, convincing her that Melissa was some kind of chosen vessel for the light, whatever that means in their belief system. He helped her escape both times." Martin concluded. "Yes, but the concerning part is what they were planning next." Spencer lowered his voice. "We found ritual items in the cave, candles, symbols drawn on the walls." According to the translator, Clarice said they were preparing for a transcendence ceremony tomorrow night. Murphy convinced her that Melissa needed to be purified by the elements first, exposure to air, then earth, then water. The implications turned Martin's blood cold. The highway was air, and the cave earth. The final stage would have been water, the lake. Spencer didn't need to elaborate on what that would have meant for a toddler. As this horrifying revelation sank in, another officer approached with a satellite phone. "Sir, we have an urgent situation developing at the hotel where the Ferris are staying." Spencer took the call, his expression darkening with each second. When he hung up, he turned to Martin with grim urgency. "Murphy wasn't working alone. The hotel room has been breached, an officer is down, and the Ferris are missing." The world seemed to tilt under Martin's feet. All of them? The parents and the child? The room was ransacked, signs of struggle. Spencer was already moving toward the vehicles, barking orders to officers. Murphy was the figurehead, but there are others, likely members of the same group who immigrated years ago, piecing together what they knew. A disturbing picture emerged, a splinter cell of true believers who had been waiting for this moment, orchestrated by Murphy from within their own community. The cabin, the caves, they had been diversions, drawing police resources away from the Farah's actual location. "I'm coming with you," Martin insisted, following Spencer to his vehicle. "This isn't a civilian matter anymore," the detective began, but Martin cut him off. "I found Melissa once."
I'm connected to this, whether I like it or not.
He held up his phone, showing the text from Vera.
She reached out to me specifically.
There must be a reason. Perhaps it was exhaustion or recognition of Martin's unique position in the case, but Spencer relented. Stay in the vehicle unless instructed otherwise.
The hotel was a flurry of activity when they arrived, paramedics treating the injured officer, forensics teams processing the room, detectives interviewing staff and guests.
The Ferris room told a violent story: overturned furniture, a lamp shattered on the floor, a child stuffed animal abandoned near the door.
Security cameras show 3 individuals entering through a service entrance, a technician reported, showing footage on a laptop. They disabled the hallway camera, but we caught this on the parking lot exit. The grainy image showed a van pulling away, too distant to read the license plate clearly, but something about the vehicle struck Martin as familiar, a distinct dent on the rear bumper.
I've seen that van, he realized suddenly.
When I visited the Ferris home, it was parked 2 houses down. This potential lead energized the investigation.
Records were checked, neighbors interviewed by phone.
Within an hour, they had a name: Nicole Perry, a Ukrainian immigrant who had moved to the area 6 months ago, exactly when Murphy had first contacted Clarice. Her rented house, when they arrived, was empty of people but full of evidence, maps marked with locations, including the Ferris home, the highway where Melissa was found, and a new location circled in red, Whitewater Falls, a remote waterfall feeding into Lake Morrison.
This is it, Spencer said, studying photographs pinned to a wall, images of the falls with strange symbols annotated around them. Their ceremonial site. The light meeting water. Dawn was breaking as multiple police units converged on Whitewater Falls.
The area was difficult to access, a steep hiking trail the only approach route. As they prepared for the final push, Martin felt the weight of what was at stake.
Somewhere ahead, a family was in danger, a child's life hanging in the balance, all because of beliefs twisted into something dangerous.
The wooden bird Clarice had clutched so desperately now sat in Martin's pocket. He'd taken it back when the paramedics needed to treat her, promising to return it. Now it seemed like a talisman, a connection to the real Clarice buried under layers of manipulation and delusion.
We've got movement near the upper falls, crackled a report from advance scouts. Multiple subjects. Confirm visual on a child. Relief that Melissa was alive mingled with anxiety over what might be unfolding.
As they approached the final ridge, Spencer ordered radio silence. The waterfall came into view, 60 feet of cascading white water plunging into a deep pool, morning sunlight creating prismatic rainbows in the mist. Near the edge of the falls stood 5 adults, forming a loose circle.
Within it, Nathan and Vera Farah knelt on the ground, hands bound behind them.
Between them sat Melissa, dressed in white, seemingly calm but clutching her father's sleeve. The leader of the group, a woman Martin presumed to be Nicole, held what appeared to be a book similar to Clarice's journal. She read from it, her voice carried away by the roar of the falls. Police teams moved into position, but the precariousness of the situation was clear. Any sudden approach could startle someone into a fatal misstep near the fall's edge. They needed a distraction, something to break the ceremony without endangering the hostages. In that moment, Martin made a decision that was either foolish bravery or desperate intuition. Slipping away from the officers, he circled to approach from the trail the group would have used. In his pocket, the wooden bird seemed to pulse with significance. They believe in signs and symbols, he reasoned.
Maybe I can give them one.
Emerging from the trees at the edge of the clearing, Martin held the wooden bird high. Clarice sent me, he called out, his voice carrying over the water's roar. She says you've misunderstood the message. Every head turned toward him, expressions ranging from shock to fury. Nicole's face contorted with rage, but uncertainty flickered in the other's eyes. The vessel isn't the child, Martin continued, stepping forward carefully. Clarice realized her mistake. The light doesn't require sacrifice. It requires protection. It was a desperate gamble, playing on beliefs he barely understood, but in the moment of confusion, Nathan acted, lunging forward despite his bound hands, knocking one of the group off balance. Vera threw herself toward Melissa, covering the child with her body. The police team seized the opportunity, converging from multiple directions. In the chaos that followed, Martin focused solely on reaching the Ferris, ensuring Melissa stayed safely away from the edge.
A gunshot cracked through the air, one of the officers firing as Nicole rushed toward Vera and Melissa with something glinting in her hand.
The woman staggered, then twisted in a half-turn that carried her over the fall's edge, her scream swallowed by the thundering water.
The remaining cultists surrendered, their resolve broken by their leader's fall.
As officers secured the scene, Martin reached Nathan and Vera, helping free their hands while SWAT team members created a protective perimeter. Melissa, bewilderingly calm throughout the ordeal, looked up at Martin with sullen recognition. She reached for his hand with complete trust, as if his appearance was expected, inevitable. "You found us," Vera whispered, tears streaming down her face again. The sun had fully risen now, its light catching in the mist to form a perfect rainbow arching over the falls. In another context, it might have seemed like the sign the cultists had been seeking, light meeting water in transcendent beauty, but the real miracle was simpler and more profound: a family intact, a child safe, tragedy averted by the narrowest of margins. As they began the careful journey down from the falls, Martin couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of the world, not in the mystical sense that Murphy and his followers believed, but in recognition of how thin the barrier sometimes was between safety and disaster, between ordinary life and unthinkable tragedy, and how sometimes being in the right place at the right moment wasn't coincidence but something that defied easy explanation, a convergence of circumstances that felt, in retrospect, almost like destiny. The wooden bird, still clutched in Melissa's tiny hands, seemed to watch it all with ancient painted eyes, a silent witness to what had nearly happened and what had been prevented.
"What made you come that night on the foggy road?" Nathan asked as they reached the base of the trail, police vehicles waiting to transport them to safety.
"What made you stop when another might have driven past?"
Martin had no simple answer.
The truth was both mundane and profound. A lifetime of paying attention, of noticing details others missed, had prepared him for that crucial moment without his knowing.
"I just saw something that didn't belong there," he said finally. "Something that needed help."
What he didn't say was how that moment of decision had irrevocably connected him to their lives, creating a bond that now seemed impossible to break. The wooden bird had passed from Clarice to him to Melissa, a circuit completed in ways none of them could have predicted. As they reached the vehicles, Detective Spencer approached with news.
"Clarice is asking for them at the hospital."
Her mind had cleared somewhat in the aftermath.
Lucidity returning in the absence of Murphy's influence.
"She wants to see her family," Spencer said. "The doctors think it might help her recovery." The implications of this loomed large.
Could Clarice find her way back from the darkness that had claimed her mind? Could the family heal from this trauma, rebuild trust across the chasms this ordeal had created?
These questions hung unanswered as they prepared to leave the falls behind, the morning sunlight now fully illuminating what had nearly been lost in darkness. And in that light, something else became clear to Martin: his involvement with the Ferris hadn't reached its conclusion. Whatever strange alignment of fate had placed him on that foggy road, it wasn't finished with any of them yet. 3 months after the events at Whitewater Falls, Martin stood in the doorway of a sunlit hospital room, watching a scene he once thought impossible. Clarice Farah sat in an armchair by the window, reading a storybook to Melissa, who was perched on her lap, pointing at pictures with delighted recognition. Vera stood nearby, her watchful presence a testament to caution not yet abandoned, but her smile reflected genuine hope. The road to this moment had been neither straight nor easy. After the cult members' arrests, the full scope of their operation had come to light, a network